Hi guys, it's me, ChazRHD, and welcome to another Grand Prix weekend. And this weekend, of course, is time for the Spanish Grand Prix of 2023. Hope all you guys are doing well, of course, after what was a very exciting weekend in Monaco. Yeah, I mean, not just the race was quite, all over the place with the rain coming and the field kind of, switching up during the race as well. But yeah, the whole weekend was just so exciting and so competitive and so close. It was a proper weekend that really is what we're asking for from Formula One in terms of entertainment. But yeah, we come to the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend, of course. Altered track layout for this circuit, the Circuit De Catalunya, near Barcelona. People do say that it is, or people like to make out that it is basically in Barcelona, but it's not. It's not that. I mean, it's not a million miles away from Barcelona, but it's not really close, if you know what I mean. It's pretty much, I think, quite a few minutes north of Barcelona is the circuit in Montmeló. Yeah, the last two corners, of course, the old last two corners that we used to have, the very fast two right-handers to finish up the lap, are returning this weekend, and it's going to make this circuit a lot faster. The lap speed should be, not the lap speed, but the lap time should be as short, if not shorter, than what we saw in Monaco. So it's going to be some very fast, exhilarating stuff this weekend in, the practice sessions, qualifying, maybe even the race as well. And we do have, by the looks of it, a chance of rain for Sunday's race. Now, whether it does rain or not, who knows? I mean, in Monaco, I didn't think it was going to rain, and then out of nowhere, it did. I mean, there was rain in the area, but I just didn't think it was actually going to hit the track. And thankfully, it did hit the track. But yeah, we'll see this weekend if that, does happen and possibly throws in an extra element to make the race weekend even more exciting. But of course, in tonight's stream, I will be doing the weekend preview, where I'll be going through all the teams and drivers, previewing how I think they will get on, and obviously predicting what I think they'll be getting results-wise from the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. And of course, in the live chat, make sure to let me know, guys, how you think things will play out this weekend. I will, just quickly, before we properly get into it, just do a poll quickly to ask you guys, who do you think will win the Spanish Grand Prix? I think the winner of this poll is not exactly going to be surprising, but I'll start it up anyway so you guys can let me know, who you think will come out on top here. And of course, the options will be Verstappen, Perez, and Alonso and Leclerc. I'll go for the fourth option because he's been pretty quick around here in the past. So let me know in that poll at the top of the live chat, who do you think will win the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend? But yeah, my expectation for the weekend is qualifying probably will be pretty exciting. I think we've got a very good competitive field for qualifying here. And you'll basically see a bit of a knock-on effect from Monaco with it being so close in the fight, pole position. Not between four different teams like it was in Monaco. I don't think it'll be quite that good, but I think it will be very close once again throughout the entire field. And then with the race, I think it really does depend on the weather conditions. If it does rain, that'd be great. If it's dry, though, we're going to need probably some alternate strategies to really mix things up and make things, properly exciting. But we'll see, of course, what does happen with the weather for Sunday's race. But yeah, like I said, in practice and qualifying, I'm expecting it to be very close and competitive, really, throughout the field. And, as I will get onto at some point during this stream, we have further important big upgrades for certain teams. Of course, tomorrow we will officially find out who has brought what for performance reasons for their car. But but I do have some pictures that I will be able to show you on screen sometime later in this stream to show you some of the big upgrades, especially for the Ferrari team. And if these upgrades do work for them, then yeah, expect them to be very competitive this weekend, at least in qualifying. But one final thing I want to say before we get into things is the usual, of course. Hope you guys are doing well, and no matter what time it is in your part of the world and where you're watching from, hope you're all having as best a time as possible. But before we get into this Grand Prix, let's check in with the championship standings after the Monaco Grand Prix. So Max Verstappen, 39 points clear now, Sergio Perez. There is now no longer a championship battle. Max Verstappen will win his third world title. Absolutely 1 million, trillion, billion %, whatever you want to call it. He will win the world title. Sergio Perez is in second still, despite having probably the worst race of his entire career, where he made so many mistakes, ended up 2 laps down on his teammate. And, I mean, if the race had gone another 10, 15 laps, he could have ended up 3 laps down. That's just how bad his race was in Monaco, of course. Did not help himself after what he did in qualifying, crashing out and starting from the very back. Fernando Alonso in third, only 12 points behind Perez. I think it is unrealistic to expect Alonso to catch and pass Perez, though, in the championship. It would require a stunning level of consistency, and would probably require Alonso winning a couple races this season for Alonso to actually beat Perez in the championship. So I'm still expecting it to be Verstappen from Perez in the top 2 positions this season, and Alonso comfortably clear of Lewis Hamilton, who is 24 points behind, and then a further 19 points behind Hamilton is George Russell, who had a decent race, but obviously could have been a lot more, and it should have been a lot more had he not made such a basic mistake into Mirabeau. I know it was quite wet at that part of the track, but yeah, went deep and lost third and then fourth place to Ocon and Hamilton respectively. So that was a big error from Russell that, as you'll see in a moment, actually cost Mercedes going up to second in the championship. And then you've got just behind Russell, Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, with Charles Leclerc in P7. 8th is Lance Stroll, up to 9th, and not too far behind Stroll is Esteban Ocon. Obviously, brilliant performance in Monaco, and Ocon having, I think so far this season with Ocon, I don't think it's been his best season so far, but he's definitely having a good year. But I think after Monaco, I think we'll start to see consistent good performances now that he's got a load of confidence in this car. And Pierre Gasly, still in P10, but did overtake Lando Norris. So Lando Norris outside of the top 10 of the championship now for the first time since, I think, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And really, if you look at the last 2, 3, 4 F1 seasons, it's quite rare to not see Lando Norris in the top 10 of the championship, because normally he's always in there. So yeah, obviously tough times for McLaren. And on the constructors' side, Red Bull 129 points clear of Aston Martin. Aston Martin, though, only 1 point clear of Mercedes. And this weekend is massive for Aston Martin, because Mercedes, this weekend, I expect to be a bit more competitive than what we saw in Monaco. And they are going to be really heavily reliant on Fernando Alonso delivering an extra special performance like he does most of the time at his home race. And yeah, if Alonso can deliver that performance and get, say, at least a podium, then it might just keep Aston Martin in second in the championship. But Mercedes are, yeah, definitely going to be, I think, more competitive this weekend. I'll get into my reasons why soon enough. Ferrari, 30 points behind Aston Martin in fourth. I think Ferrari, if this upgrade this weekend does work for them, I think they can catch Aston Martin, but still with their race pace issues and, them wearing their tyres out way more than almost every other team, it's still going to make it pretty hard for them to finish in second, but it's definitely still possible, no doubt about that. And then you've got Alpine in fifth, now 18 points clear of McLaren in 6th. Alpine, 55 points behind Ferrari. And if Alpine, who have made some bold comments coming into this weekend's race, saying that they think they can be ahead of Ferrari and Mercedes this weekend, if they are correct with that prediction, then I think Alpine could catch Ferrari in a few races from now. Definitely not out of the question. Haas F1 in 7th, and then Alfa Romeo 2 points behind in 8th, with AlphaTauri 9th, and Williams at, of course, the very back of the field. And you can see quite clearly now from Alpine and McLaren to the final 4 teams, a clear gap starting to appear. And soon, a clear gap will appear between Alpine and McLaren, because I don't expect Alpine to continue pulling away from the McLaren team. But let's now get on to the track layout for this weekend's race. So, of course, the first, or almost every corner up until the final 2 corners for this weekend is exactly the same as last year. And obviously the first sector, which goes all the way up to, I think, turn 4 is very high speed. Obviously straight line speed also does matter to a degree in the first sector. But in the middle sector, it's really about the, I would say, high speed or high to medium speed corners in terms of what matters through there. And then with the final sector, now that they've got rid, thankfully, of that awful final chicane, now the final sector is 2 slow to medium speed type corners, and then 2 very high speed corners that could very well be completely flat out this weekend. I think definitely one of those final 2 corners will be flat out. Probably the final corner will be the one that's flat out. But yeah, it's going to be an incredibly fast lap here in Spain. The anticipation is that the lap time will come down by 4 to 5 seconds. And pole position last year was... let me just have a look what pole position was last year for the Spanish Grand Prix. And it was a 1:18.7. So if it's, say, 5 seconds quicker than what we saw last year. And of course, you do have to factor in that these cars are way quicker than they were at this same race last year. They should be in the 1:12s or even 1:13s. Arguably, you could say even quicker than that. So yeah, it's going to be quite a short lap around the Circuit De Catalunya. And I think it will definitely make, even if it is a dry race, for a more exciting race than you normally get here in Spain, because they'll be able to carry with the cars able to follow a lot better than they used to. The cars will be able to carry the momentum through the final 2 corners in the slipstream and get a good run on the car ahead, and then execute possibly an overtake on the pit straight or into turn 1. So, yeah, I think we're going to see definitely an interesting race this weekend. Maybe not the best of the season or the absolute one of the best ever for this track, but yeah, I think it will be a decent race with the changes that have, of course, been made. But of course, what I usually do coming into a Grand Prix is I compare certain parts of the track to races we've recently been at and look at a part of the track at a recent race that is similar to the race we're coming at to see how the performance was around similar type corners. Now, the only sector that I'm going to be comparing to this track is Sector 1 from Miami, and really I can only compare Sector 1 in Miami to the middle sector, and maybe you could argue the final sector here in Barcelona. And these are the teams that performed well in the first sector in Miami, which is mostly high-speed corners. Red Bull, of course, no surprise there, the quickest team by a 1/10.5 from Ferrari. Aston Martin were a couple tenths of a second down. And as you will see this weekend, Aston Martin still, because their car at high speed is not that great, compared to, say, Red Bull and Ferrari. I still think that's going to cost them dearly in qualifying, and qualifying will still matter this weekend, even with the track being made a lot faster and easier, I would say, to overtake. It will still matter, the high-speed corner performance. Alfa Romeo, they were very good in the high-speed corners in Miami, and definitely watch out for them this weekend, because they had a few new upgrades brought onto the car at the last race, and Valtteri Bottas, as we know, has always been very quick here. He obviously won here. Did he win here? No, he had a pole position, in 2019. One of his best pole position laps where he qualified over half a second quicker than Lewis Hamilton. And, was truly brilliant that weekend, at least in qualifying. In the race, though, ended up losing position to Hamilton at the start and ended up finishing in second. But point is, Valtteri has always been very quick at the Circuit De Catalunya. I mean, last year, for example, I think he qualified in 7th and was actually at one point, I think, in like 4th or 5th place. So, yeah, it's definitely possible that Alfa Romeo could score a point or two from this weekend's race. So, yeah, definitely watch out for Alfa Romeo. Alpine were decent. In the first sector in Miami. Haas not too bad. Mercedes were quite poor. Of course, though, they have brought quite a few upgrades since the Miami Grand Prix, so you would expect their high-speed corner performance to be improved a bit on what we saw back in Miami. And then the final three teams were Williams, AlphaTauri, and McLaren, of course, had a shocking performance in Miami. Now, of course, it is important to remember that pretty much all of these teams have brought quite a few new upgrades to their car since the Miami Grand Prix. Some of the upgrades for this weekend, for example, I'll show on screen. The point I'm trying to make is, just because this is how the teams ranked in the, say, high-speed corners in Miami, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look that way this weekend, because, again, certain teams have upgraded their car more than others. And, of course, some upgrades are just, in general, more important for certain teams than others have brought to their car. So I don't think it's going to turn out kind of like this. I have my own thoughts and predictions when it comes to how I think the field will be this weekend. And I think we'll get into my qualifying and race predictions for this weekend's race in Spain. Important to remind you guys, though, of course, these predictions are not final. This is my, before the weekend, before I've seen any running predictions. They will be different once I see, for example, for qualifying, once I see the first couple practice sessions, I will change my prediction probably slightly or even a bit. And then for the race, of course, it does depend on grid position. So yeah, of course, this is not my final prediction on both sides, but let's get into it. And of course, I've gone for the predicted gaps as usual. So in qualifying, I think Charles Leclerc will get pole position for Ferrari. And the reason I think that is because, as I'll show you a bit further into this stream, they have brought quite a big upgrade to this race. A new side pod. I think they've also got a new maybe front wing, and they've just in general brought quite a big upgrade package to this weekend's race. Red Bull also have brought an upgrade, but it is nothing as big as what Ferrari have brought, and I believe that it will work for Ferrari, and it will close the gap enough for Charles Leclerc to properly fight for pole position. And I think Leclerc, a driver that has always been super quick here in Barcelona, will get pole position just about from Max Verstappen in second. Carlos Sainz will be up in third. Of course, he's always been very quick at his home Grand Prix. Sergio Perez, I'm going to go just behind in fourth. Alonso will qualify in fifth, but by no means will Aston Martin be quicker than Mercedes this weekend. I do expect Mercedes to have maybe not the third best car, but I think in qualifying they'll be right there with Aston Martin. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. And I think Lewis Hamilton will be just behind Alonso in 6th, with Russell just behind in 7th. And then Esteban Ocon will be in P8. Yes, I think Alpine will drop off quite a bit from what we saw in Monaco. As I kind of explained after the race in Monaco, I just think Alpine's car is a lot more suited to a street circuit type of circuit, basically. And I think their car especially is good in slower corners. And we saw that actually in Monaco, because Esteban Ocon had the second best final sector time in Monaco in qualifying, and that's a big reason why he qualified 4th and of course finished on the podium. So, you know, with this weekend there being like maybe 2 slow corners at most, I just don't see it suiting Alpine this weekend as much as what we saw in Monaco. Don't though think for a second that Monaco is just a fluke, because I think there will be a few more races this season where Alpine will be maybe not finishing on the podium, but they will be contending with teams like Aston Martin, Ferrari and Mercedes. One track that's coming up very soon, where I think they'll be quite competitive, is Montreal, the Canadian Grand Prix. I think that circuit will really suit their car, because a lot of the corners there quite slow. And then when it comes to the straights and the high-speed stuff, of course, their car pretty quick in a straight line. So, yeah, I think in Canada, I think Alpine will be, again, maybe not podium contenders necessarily, but I think they will be pretty quick. But here in Spain, like I said, I just don't think they'll be quite on the pace of Ferrari, Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes, at least in qualifying. Lance Stroll, I think, will end up in P9. The reason I've gone for him in P9 and 0.4 of a second I think he'll be away from Alonso is because at the minute he's performing poorly, and around this circuit he's never really had consistently good performances here in Spain. So yeah, I think he will once again underdeliver in what is quite clearly a better car than what he is showing so far in 2023. And yeah, he will, end up with a better result this weekend, but it still won't be quite good enough for Aston Martin need in 2023. And just about sneaking into the top 10, I believe, will be Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Now, you may think, well, where's McLaren? Why don't you think they'll finish in the top 10? I will get onto that once I get onto McLaren later in this stream, because I will explain my reasons. And then for the race prediction, again, I've gone for the predicted gaps. I think despite Ferrari getting pole position, Red Bull will still end up being not just victors, but clear victors. Max Verstappen, I think, will win the race by, yes, 20 seconds from Perez. I think he will, let's say that scenario does play out from qualifying where it's Leclerc on pole from Verstappen 2nd, Sainz 3rd, Perez 4th. I think Verstappen then, in a dry race, overtakes Leclerc pretty easily, because obviously the Ferrari would be killing its tyres. And then Max will just obliterate everyone, because obviously right now he is the best driver in Formula 1, and that Red Bull car in a race situation around this track in the dry should be way, way, way too good for everybody else. So yeah, I think Verstappen wins easily from Perez 2nd. Alonso will finish in 3rd. A big reason he'll finish in 3rd, though, is because of the Ferrari's poor tyre management. I think that's definitely going to be a big reason why Ferrari don't get as good of a result as they'll get, I think, in qualifying. So yeah, I think Alonso will eventually find his way up to 3rd. And I think Alonso's race this weekend will be similar to what happened in Bahrain at the start of the season. He'll qualify again behind both Ferraris, but in the race, I know, of course, Leclerc had his engine issue, but I think with both Ferraris this time, Ferrari, once they start properly cooking their tyres, I think Alonso will, during the race, somehow, some way, find his way past and finish on the podium for what would be the 6th time in the first 7 races, which is incredible consistency from Alonso. And then I'm going to go Leclerc 4th, Sainz 5th, Hamilton in 6th and Russell 7th. The big reason why I don't see Mercedes finishing ahead of both Ferraris or one of the Ferraris is because Mercedes will firstly lose too much time in the first stint being quite a bit away from Ferrari, who will be more so towards the front. And I think even if Ferrari are struggling, I don't think Mercedes have enough power, enough straight line speed to overtake the Ferraris down the straight around a track that is still going to be hard to overtake at. I think we have to remember that. It's not going to be, super easy. So, yeah, I think Mercedes will finish in 6th and 7th, but I don't think their pace will be quite as bad as what we saw in Monaco. And we'll see, say, more encouraging signs from the Mercedes team. Lance Stroll end up in 8th place, but I think he'll end up a lap down on the leader, Max Verstappen. And then the final 2 points-paying positions will be Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly. So that's my race prediction, guys. Let me know in the chat, like I said, do you agree or disagree with my predictions there? And actually, before we go back to this, let me just go onto this slide. Just to quickly remind you guys as to what the schedule is for this weekend. So my next piece of content after tonight will be tomorrow night, same time, live at 8 PM UK time for the full qualifying preview for the Spanish Grand Prix, where of course we'll go through all of the data from practice and look at who is quick so far and who is not. And then on Saturday I will be doing a very long stream of I think over 5 hours it'll be. Yeah, it will. Of a practice 3, F2 sprint race, and then finally F1 qualifying watch along. So make sure to join me for that on Saturday. Be going live at 11:15 AM, of course, UK time, then finishing up at about 4:30 PM. And then on Sunday, of course, it'll be the same plan as what we had in Monaco. I'll be going live 2 hours before the race starts at 12 PM UK time. Firstly, for the race preview, then we'll be doing the watch along, and Nib will be joining me, of course, once again, hopefully, less laggy than he was in Monaco. And then, of course, I'll be doing a reaction to the race after with you guys as well. And if we do get some good, big talking points from the race, then there'll be a piece of content coming out on Monday as well. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. And as well, for everyone watching, make sure to smash that like button. Currently on 13 likes. Let's try and get those likes up to, say, 20 or 25, something like that. That'd be good if we could do so. As talking of Nib, I see in the chat that he just said, I'm holding you to this as your final prediction, smoking all that hopium. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a bit of hopium, but you would think such a big upgrade, it has to have, for Ferrari, some sort of effect. Yeah, I can't imagine that it will, make them slower or see them not improve at all. I just can't. Yeah, I can't imagine that happening. But I still don't think they've got a car that can win right now. The reason Ferrari can't win right now, of course, is because of their just poor time management, which is really hampering them and has done basically for the last year or so. But looking forward, I don't really see where they can, what race they can maybe limit that issue at. I mean, maybe you could say the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, but I'm not sure they'll be necessarily, for that track, the quickest team. So, yeah. I think Ferrari can win a race this season. I mean, pole position, of course, we saw them get that in Baku. Could have had it a couple other races if things had gone more so to plan, and if they'd, hooked it up all together as a team, they could have had pole position in a couple other places potentially. But yeah, if you look at the minute, obviously winning a race right now for Ferrari is pretty much impossible unless Red Bull have a major issue with both cars. But I think looking at the minute, I would say the only two teams that I think can win a race in 2023, other, of course, than Red Bull, is Aston Martin and Ferrari. And the only two reasons I say that is because, one, Alonso and the Aston Martin has been super consistent right there behind the Red Bulls. And if anything was to go wrong majorly with Red Bull, then I think Alonso would be there absolutely to pounce. And I do think Aston Martin will make some improvements during the season and close that gap to Red Bull. Not massively, but to a certain degree, I think they will. And the reason I say Ferrari is because if they can improve their car with this upgrade and maybe another upgrade and get to the point where they can legitimately get pole position a few times for the rest of the season, then maybe at certain races they can, hold off Red Bull, maybe if it's because it's too hard to overtake, or if they have a big enough pace advantage from qualifying, maybe they can carry that through to the race and not lose as much time in the race as they would do at other tracks. So, yeah, like I said, the only two teams I can see winning a race at the minute, Aston Martin and Ferrari. But I think I have to, I have to point out that it is quite unlikely at the minute that both Aston Martin and Ferrari win a race. And when I mean quite unlikely, I mean like 10%, 15% at most. And that's me being quite generous, to be honest, in terms of their chances of winning a race this season. So, yeah. Red Bull, they just have the perfect car. And, of course, the best driver in Formula One. So not only do you have to contend with what is an amazing car, you've also got to make sure that your driver in your car, your best driver, can contend with the absolute best of the best, which is very hard, of course, to do. People may be surprised me saying, or me not saying that Mercedes are a team that can win a race this season. I just don't think they've got a car that can win a race this season. I think it's just, fundamentally bad car. And I think that, even though they will make improvements during this season, I don't see it being enough for them to be winning a race. I think they can get some more podiums. Obviously, they've only had one podium this season back in Australia. But, I think a race win is just a bit too far for them. And even if Red Bull, there comes a race where they fall apart and either have terrible pace for whatever reason, or just have the worst race ever with both cars, Mercedes still have to beat Ferrari and Aston Martin. And right now, they're not doing that great at beating those two teams. I mean, yes, they're only a point behind Aston Martin in the championship, but let's be honest, Aston Martin have been quicker than Mercedes at almost every race this season. So, yeah, it's going to be very, very, very tough for Mercedes to get even near, I think, a race win. So, yeah, the best I can see for them is just a few more podiums, I think, in 2023. And Nib saying again, of all people, I least expected you to forget that it's Ferrari after all. But, yeah, hopefully they get closer. I mean, at the end of the day, it is just, again, I'm hoping that that they will improve. We have seen with Ferrari plenty of times, they put upgrades on and they don't really improve the car that much, or they don't improve the car at all. Sometimes make the car even worse. I remember that. I think back in 2018, the late part of 2018, they put an upgrade on the car and it made the car like half a second nearly slower than it was before. But I just think with how big the upgrade is, I would be amazed if it didn't make their car quicker by, a couple tenths of a second, say. And, I think they'll, in qualifying again, be contenders, but in the race, they'll be absolutely nowhere near it. But let's get into the teams, and let's go through in a bit more detail why I think they'll end up with the results that I've gone for. And, of course, we will start at the Red Bull team. And with those upgrades that have been brought this weekend, guys, I will get onto them and show them on screen in a few minutes, so don't worry. They will be shown very soon. Yeah, we'll start with Red Bull. I just don't see them being stopped in the race, even in the wet. I think they'll have too good of a car. So, yeah, I just don't see anyone beating Red Bull in the race. If they were to not win the Spanish Grand Prix, that would be an enormous shock. It really, really would. One of the biggest shocks, honestly, in recent history, because they have the perfect car for the race. They manage their tyres well. Car is perfectly balanced. They're not too slow down the main straight. They're just going to be too good. In qualifying, though, because Ferrari, obviously, their tyre issues for the race, of course, do not matter in qualifying. I think it will be at least close in the fight for pole position between Red Bull and Ferrari. And I think Leclerc will take it. Leclerc has always been very quick here in Spain. And I think Verstappen, in the end, will be beaten by the Monegasque driver in the fight for pole position. But really, this weekend, all Red Bull need to do is just, through practice, as they usually do, set the car up for the race, get whatever qualifying result they do, which will probably be, at worst, what I've gone for, or, a second and a third, maybe, in qualifying. And then, obliterate F4 in the race like they normally do. But, yeah, I don't see any other team getting really that close to them at all in the race. I would be massively surprised if they had really that big of trouble winning the race, even if they're not on pole position. So yeah, Red Bull will dominate once again, with Verstappen winning and Sergio Perez finishing in second. Now on to the Ferrari team, who of course in Monaco, the result was quite poor, 6th and 8th. It was a lot worse than it should have been. Obviously, they had Carlos Sainz for quite a long time up in 4th place, and he was going to finish in 4th place if only it stayed dry. But of course, the rain came at the wrong time. Ferrari also made the wrong decision as to when to pit their 2 drivers for intermediate tyres, and that's a big reason why they finished in 6th and 8th in Monaco. I think people, though, are overrating their bad result, bad performance in Monaco. Because we have to remember, in qualifying, Ferrari were still one of the top 3 teams, and Leclerc was only a 1/10 of a second off pole position. And then in the race, I mean, even though Ocon got the podium, Ferrari were faster than Alpine in the dry in the race. So I didn't really see Monaco as much of an issue as what other people saw. Of course, the result, not good. They didn't get the best result they could, but really, with Leclerc's grid penalty, I don't see what they... I just don't really see what they could have done to get a podium or even better than that in Monaco. And yeah, if Leclerc had not blocked Lando Norris horribly in qualifying, I think Leclerc would have finished on the podium, the Ferrari team, because they as well got the tyre choice for the start of the race in Monaco bang on, and I have to compliment them once again with that strategic choice. Of course, we do bash them a lot when it comes to what tyres they start on or go on to at pit stops and when they pit and all of that, but that was a very good decision from Ferrari, because it did keep them more so in play than it would have done if they were on, say, the medium compound tyre in the Monaco Grand Prix. But, it didn't help that obviously Carlos Sainz went into the back of Ocon, broke a bit of his front wing, and did lack quite a bit of pace after that he did have. As I remember, right before he hit Ocon, he was all over the back of him for 3rd place. So, yeah, the point is, Monaco was not as bad as people are making out. Again, the result wasn't good, but the pace was still, I think, quite good compared to what I've seen so far this season. I've seen a lot worse weekends for the Ferrari team in 2023. And for this weekend, yeah, I think Ferrari will be in the fight for pole position, and I think they will take pole position with Charles Leclerc. His lap, I remember last year especially, in qualifying to get that pole was just extraordinary. I know Verstappen had DRS issues, but even with a working DRS, I don't think we can say absolutely he would have got pole position, because Leclerc's lap after as well an early spin in Q3 was incredible, delivering under quite a lot of pressure at that point of the season. And I think was, 3/10 quicker than Verstappen, or 3.5 tenths quicker? So yeah, brilliant lap from him that day. And was going to win the Spanish Grand Prix last year by a country mile until his team intervened and cost him the race. So yeah, Leclerc, I think, will be on pole position. Sainz, I'm going to go in third. The absolute worst I see for Sainz is P4. He's always been pretty competitive here in Barcelona, as long as he doesn't do what he did last year and spin into the gravel at turn 4. To be fair to him, Verstappen did the same, but it is still a poor mistake. But yeah, like I said a few moments ago, in the race, I just don't think they'll have the ability to manage their tyres well enough, obviously, to compete with Red Bull. But I think Alonso and the Aston Martin will be just too consistently quick for them in the race. And I think Alonso probably will get past both Ferraris on track rather than through the pit stop phases. So yeah, I think we'll see some good racing between Alonso and the Aston Martin and the two Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz. But if they were to finish where I predict them to finish, 4th and 5th, that'd be a good haul of points, 22 points, because they would outscore Aston Martin and the Mercedes team and close the gap in that fight for second in the championship. And that, of course, has to be their aim now for 2023, to reclaim second place, of course, where they finished last year in the Constructors' Championship. And yeah, if they can get 4th and 5th, I think definitely they're on their way then. If this new upgrade does work for them, which I am expecting it will, then they're on their way to, clawing that back over the course of the season. And now we'll go on to the Mercedes team. And yeah, Monaco, great result for them. 23 points they scored in total. 4th and 5th for the two Mercedes drivers. Of course, Lewis Hamilton getting the fastest lap point as well. Could have been a podium, should have been a podium, but George Russell went deep, of course, at Mirabeau, which cost him and the team the chance at a brilliant result, and a fortunate result as well, given that Russell had stayed out really until the rain came to make his first and only pit stop. But yeah, for this weekend, in terms of performance, I think they will be better than what we saw in Monaco. Because in Monaco, Mercedes were not even in qualifying, in the race as well. They were the 5th best team in the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. Obviously in qualifying, you had Red Bull, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Alpine ahead of them. And in the race, Mercedes weren't really that much quicker. They benefited, obviously, massively from Ferrari leaving their cars out too long compared to Mercedes, and obviously Ferrari got caught out but then by the weather. And Russell, obviously, despite making that mistake, was able to jump his way past Pierre Gasly, so that gained him a couple extra points than he would have got from Monaco. But yeah, I think this weekend will be better for them. I think they'll be quicker than Alpine. I just think this circuit will suit their car better. I think their car's a lot better at a high-speed circuit, which is what this circuit is, compared to Monaco, which is high-speed in certain areas, but in other areas is quite slow. And the slow-speed corners really is where Mercedes were painfully slow in Monaco, as they have been really for the last year or so. That's been really their biggest weakness. So yeah, here in Barcelona, they'll be quicker than Alpine, and they will be, in qualifying, I think, right on the pace with Aston Martin, arguably quicker than Aston Martin, but I think Aston Martin will be quite a bit better than them in the race, and I'm expecting Alonso to put in a great performance in the race, as he usually does here in Barcelona. So really, Mercedes' fight this weekend is against Ferrari, and if Ferrari don't end up with as good of a qualifying result as I think they will, then there is a decent chance Mercedes could, beat Ferrari or stop them from scoring as many points as they maybe will in Spain this weekend. And of course, the aim for this weekend simply has to be to score more points than Aston Martin, because if they were to, and if it was to be them outscoring Aston Martin by 2 points or more, then they'll go up to second in the championship, which despite this car being so poor, would be a brilliant, season so far for them. It really, really would, because they have limited the damage really well. Really, really well. Both drivers have been brilliant this season. Super competitive with one another, and of course with other drivers when they, could be. The race pace at times has been pretty good. And yeah, they've really, like I said, limited the damage very well this season. And if improvements keep coming to this Mercedes car, then I don't see why they can't finish second in the championship. It's definitely possible, especially when Aston Martin, the team we'll go on to in a moment, have got a driver in Lance Stroll who is lagging quite far behind his teammate Fernando Alonso. And that's something that's possibly and most probably going to cost Aston Martin second in the championship if they are not to finish in P2. So yeah, Mercedes, championship-wise, given what their car's like, looking good. And yeah, I think the pace will be better this weekend, but still not enough. And I do have to say once again for Mercedes fans, please do not come into this weekend expecting miracles, because Mercedes are not going to finish on the podium. They are not going to get anywhere near pole position or win the race. That is still quite a bit away. And yeah, I think you're going to have to wait probably until the next... I'm trying to think, what is the next European race? I think it's not Silverstone. No, it's Austria. I think the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, which of course is not very far from Mercedes' team base, I think that's the next Grand Prix that you could see another jump forward from this team, where I expect they'll bring another sizable upgrade to improve the pace of their car. And if it does improve their car once again, then who knows? Maybe they can start getting on the podium in a more regular fashion. And we will finish up with the final two front-running teams. Aston Martin, of course, Fernando Alonso coming to his home Grand Prix this weekend. He's had a brilliant season so far. He's been literally perfect. He hasn't had one race this season, really, where I can think that he, did not get the best result he could. In Monaco, maybe he could have won the race. That was more down to his team, though, of course, rather than himself choosing at the first pit stop for Aston Martin to go from hard tyres to medium tyres. But yeah, for Alonso, he's just been absolutely brilliant brilliant this year. And I see him, of course, keeping that up for this weekend's Spanish Grand Prix. And I think Alonso, will finish on the podium for the 6th time in the first 7 races. The key for Alonso is out qualifying the 2 Mercedes cars and the Alpine cars if they are as competitive as Alpine say they will be. Because if they can do that with Alonso, not necessarily both cars, but just with Alonso, then I think a podium is definitely possible. But if Fernando doesn't have quite the best qualifying, and we have to remember, last year in Barcelona, Fernando did not have quite the best qualifying. He was, I think, 17th in qualifying. Came back for a good race in 9th for Alpine, but had quite a poor qualifying session. So, and of course, we know qualifying is not his strongest point. So, as long as he gets the job done in qualifying and does qualify in 5th place, around about there at worst, then I think he's all good then to set himself up for a podium finish. Because of course we know the heroics that he's capable of here in Barcelona. We've seen it here before, obviously in 2013, where he went around the outside of 2 cars at turn 3, Raikkonen and Hamilton. 2011, of course, we saw him start from P4 and get into the lead, into the first corner. Plenty of times here in Spain, he has produced brilliant performances. And Alonso, of course, is one of the drivers to watch this weekend. Not just because he's been so great this season and because he is such a great driver, but because this is his home race. And important to remember with Alonso, is that he does have a good bit of experience on his side when it comes to those final 2 corners, because the last time we had those final 2 very fast right-handers for the F1 race was 2006. And in that 2006 race, would you like to guess who won the Spanish Grand Prix? Indeed, it was Fernando Alonso in his title-winning Renault that year, where he, well, if you go back and watch the race, obliterated the rest of the field. Including, Michael Schumacher, Kimi Räikkönen, Jenson Button, Fisichella, Massa, good drivers like that. So yeah, watch out for Alonso. Maybe that experience through those final 2 corners from a long time ago will serve him well this weekend. May also serve Lewis Hamilton well, because I think he does have experience of those final 2 corners as well from his GP2 days. So yeah, we'll see if that can serve those 2 drivers well this weekend. For Lance Stroll, let's go back onto him. Yeah, Lance Stroll just isn't quick right now, and I don't see it getting any better here. He doesn't have that much form right now. His confidence clearly is quite a bit lower than what we saw at the start of the season. And yeah, given that historically speaking, he's never been stunningly quick really here in Spain. The only year really where he put in a decent performance was 2020, I think it was. The Racing Point, where he actually got up, I think, to 2nd or 3rd on the first lap. So, yeah, except for that race, where I think he finished in 4th place, he's not really done anything here in Barcelona. So I expect Stroll to still be in the top 10, but to not really score that many points for Aston Martin. And he does need to get his act together, because Aston Martin really now do need him to step up. And the final front-running team we'll go on to is Alpine. And it is great to say, by the way, that we have 5 front-running Formula 1 teams. The first time we've had 5 front-running Formula 1 teams, really, since, 2012, I would say. Yeah, it really is great to say. And long may it continue. For Alpine, though, of course, in Monaco, brilliant performance. Esteban Ocon on the podium. Pierre Gasly still having a good race and finishing in 7th. Was right behind Leclerc at the end of the race. But really, Gasly cost himself in qualifying what could have been a better result. But yeah, this weekend, as I explained earlier, I don't think they'll be as quick this weekend, because I believe their car is very good in the slower speed corners rather than high speed corners. We did see in Monaco in the final sector, as I said earlier, Esteban Ocon was the 2nd quickest driver in the final sector. A big reason why he was so quick in qualifying, and a big reason why they finished on the podium last weekend in Monaco. And obviously here in Spain, it's really just about medium and high speed corners. So Alpine will still be competitive, but I just don't see anything close to a podium finish. But I really hope I am wrong, because Alpine, like I said, they have come into this weekend saying that they think they'll be right in there and even ahead of Ferrari and Mercedes, which is quite a prediction from them. And if they are correct, then I cannot wait to see what they can do once again. But yeah, I think they'll be, not too far behind in qualifying, say Mercedes and Aston Martin, but yeah, I just don't think they'll have quite enough pace to be competing with those teams. But like I said a few minutes ago, there will be races this season where Alpine will pop back up into that fight for, say, the top 5 or even a podium. And yeah, the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal, I think, will be the next race you'll see Alpine super competitive, as they were very quick there. If you remember last year, Alonso was, 2nd in qualifying? I know it was wet, but still, brilliant performance. And in the race, his pace was really good until he suffered an ERS issue, which cost him 1 second per lap. If it wasn't for that, I think Alonso would have finished on the podium. So yeah, watch out for Alpine in Montreal. But for this weekend, I think they'll be, still scoring okay points, but just won't be anywhere near close to what we saw in Monaco. Now, before we go on to the rest of the teams, and I decide who is going to be best of the midfield, Let me quickly get into these upgrades that certain teams have brought. Now, again, we don't know the full story as to who has brought what upgrades, because that is not officially announced until the Friday, and there is an FIA document, I believe, that does show each team's upgrades that they have to, of course, declare. So, yeah, at the minute, we only have visual things that we can see. We haven't had any confirmation of anything else necessarily so far. Of course, we had multiple big upgrades in Monaco, which will more so come alive here in Spain. But let me just quickly make my screen bigger, and we'll get into a couple here. And we will start at Red Bull Racing. Of course, all credit to Albert Fabrega, such a brilliant journalist. And this is a new floor edge for the Red Bull team. On the top here is the Barcelona upgrade, and on the bottom is what it looked like before. So just a redesign to the edge of the floor. Not anything major, but of course, they've brought it onto the car because they think it'll make it quicker. But yeah, just an update to the design and flow of that area. And if we go down, we can see now Ferrari. Now, Ferrari are probably bringing this weekend the biggest upgrade out of any team. Let's start with the floor. So you can see here on the top, this is the floor for Barcelona. And on the bottom, you can see the floor here that was in Monaco. Now, on the top, you can see quite a bit towards the back of the floor. It's quite raised quite a bit higher than it was before. And yeah, just a complete different, or not complete different, but a different shape than, of course, what they had before. That's why they've gone for that. And the reason they've gone for that is because they have a new sidepod upgrade, akin to the Red Bull. So on the top here is the Barcelona sidepod, which you can see in the way it slopes, it is a lot more like the Red Bull. And then on the bottom is the old Ferrari sidepod, which was quite unique, their sidepod, compared to the other teams. There's only really them and Haas, and I think Alfa Romeo, maybe to a certain extent, had that sidepod. And also, there's an update here to the mirror. You can see the difference, obviously the new one on the top, the old one on the bottom, and yeah, just a redesign, a small redesign of that area. And not sure there's anything else. Let me just try, though, and see if we can get a different picture that shows the Ferrari upgrade better. Because I did see another one online which showed it from a better angle. So let me just find it quickly. And right. Yeah, this is it. Wait, hold on. Is that it? Yeah, I'd say this is it. So, yeah, from this angle, you can see better the new sidepod shape. It's a lot straighter. It's not as curved as the old one. And it's a lot more like the Red Bull and Aston Martin with the way it goes down towards the floor. And, yeah, just more akin to the Red Bull sidepod. And, of course, with a new sidepod upgrade, a new redesign to the floor area, which you can see again towards the rear of the floor just here, and also the new mirror as well. With all that put together, if it does work for them, which it should, of course, that's why they put it on the car, I think they'll be, yeah, at least a couple tenths of a second quicker. And I think at least in qualifying from now on, it is going to make Ferrari quite a threat for the rest of 2023. Again, in qualifying. For the race, they are still going to be suffering quite a bit with their tyre management issues, because that issue is a more fundamental problem with the design of the, I think, the chassis, I believe, and the suspension and all of that. And I think that issue is something that can't really be fixed until next season. I mean, they can try and limit it, say, during this season, but I don't see them fundamentally fixing it until at least the start of next year. So yeah, we'll see what Ferrari can do with that. But looks good on the Ferrari, and I think if it does work for them, again, makes them a lot more competitive for qualifying coming up in the next few races, which is their strongest part of the strongest part of any weekend. Before though we get into the rest of the teams, let me come to you guys in the chat. Let me know what you think is going to happen this weekend, how you think all the top 5 teams are going to perform, how the top few drivers will perform. Just let me know in general how you think things will go this weekend. And by the way, good to see we're on 22 likes. Cheers for that. Let's try and get up to, say, 25 plus if we can in the next few minutes. Anyway, hello to all you guys. Good to see you all. Sparky Pete says Red Bull will be unstoppable. Getting second in the championship is good, but if you can be 2 points behind second place before the allotment reset at the end of June, lol, third gets more aero testing time. Yeah, that is a bit of a funny thing that, even if you're level on points with second in the championship in the constructors, if you are still factually behind, you will get more wind tunnel time. So at the minute, Mercedes don't, I think, really want to be getting up to second just yet. I think they want to maybe hold off on that until, when we get past the 30th of June. Of course, this weekend and the next Grand Prix in Canada are the final 2 full race weekends before the order for who can do the most aero testing is reset. Because the Austrian Grand Prix, I think qualifying and the race for the the sprint race, and the race for the Austrian Grand Prix is the day and the 2 days after it is reset. And of course, with the constructors table the way it is at the moment, a reminder, you can see that Red Bull, of course, with their further reduction because of the cost cap penalty, they will not really be able to develop their car any further past, I would say, the British Grand Prix. Aston Martin are not really upgrading their car that much. I mean, fundamentally, it is a very good car, so they don't have to really massively improve it. But, yeah, so far they've not really closed the gap to Red Bull, I would say. Mercedes then will be third, if, of course, it is to be like this on June the 30th. And Mercedes, I do expect to be not the most, or the team that improves the most in the second half of the season necessarily, but out of the top teams, I think absolutely that is possible. And then Ferrari, of course, will have quite a bit more wind tunnel time than they had in the second half of last year, because obviously this time last year they were in second in the championship, but at the moment they are in 4th place. So, Ferrari probably could close the gap a bit to Red Bull by, say, a third of a second in the second half of the season, as long as the upgrades do actually improve their car. One team to watch out for, which I think I said back in Monaco, I made this point with Alpine, is that, with them being so quick now and being as close as they are to teams like Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes, if they are in still 5th place on June the 30th, which most likely they will be, it'd be very surprising if they were to get up to 4th, then they really could make a push to be not one of the quickest teams on the grid at the end of the season, but they could be one of the top 3 teams on pure pace at the end of this season, because, compared to Aston Martin, they'll be able to develop their car quite a bit more. And one thing I have noticed with Alpine, I noticed this last year and I've noticed it this year also already, is that whenever they do put an upgrade on Alpine, they are automatically quicker and you can see the difference. And they are very good at making their car steadily, say once every 4 or 5 races, just a bit quicker. So, yeah, watch out for Alpine in the second half of this season. I think when we get to the very end of the season, I would not be surprised if Alpine are able to, say, maybe even consistently fight for top 5 positions in the race and even fight for a podium. But I think consistently at the minute, I don't think that's quite possible. So, yeah, we'll see if Alpine can keep improving on what is fundamentally a very good car. And then, of course, the rest of the teams are as they are at the minute. McLaren, obviously, they have quite a bit of upgrades to come. We believe they've got a new B-spec car coming to the British Grand Prix. And let's hope that car does, improve their chances for the rest of the season. But to be honest, I don't see McLaren climbing from 6th in the championship, even if they have a much improved car for the second half of the season. Right, let's find some other comments here if I can. Josiah says, if the race is dry, they will walk it, but it's wet. If it's wet, watch out for Lewis and Fernando springing a surprise. Yeah, possible. Right, let's find some other comments here if I can. Greg Martinez says, I'm sorry, but I'm out on Checo, Race, Max Alonso, and George for the top 3. Greg saying Ferrari is failing their drivers. Not for the first time, of course. Been doing it for 15 years straight. Josiah says, there's realistically more chance of Mercedes winning a race this season than those other 2 teams. I disagree. Because at the minute, and so far this season, they've been slower than the other 2, Aston Martin and Ferrari. Yeah, in the race they've been quicker than, say, Ferrari, but you can't, if you're going to win a race, you can't be starting, so far back on the grid. I mean, that's a big reason why last year they only got 1 win when they could have got maybe 3 or 4 wins in 2022. And I think, they still struggle with their pace in qualifying and getting a good enough grid position for what they maybe deserve in the race. McLaren F1 races, good chance for Alex Albon to get at least a point this weekend. Not so many slow speed turns, and Williams ain't exactly the king of downforce. True. I think Albon will definitely get into Q2 and not be a million miles away from the top 10. But yeah, I think overall, I think Williams will just lack a fundamentally good enough car to be up in the top 10. It's going to be very close outside of the top 5 teams between McLaren, Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri, Haas, and even to a degree Williams. It's going to be very, very close. So, yeah, obviously we'll get onto that soon. Crystal Racing says Toro Rosso scored 39 points and finished 6th in 2008. Anyone else think this year's 6th place finishes might end up with fewer than even that? Remember the point system changed in 2010? Yeah, it is possible. I mean, McLaren at the minute are on 17 points, which is only, 20 points basically less than Toro Rosso were in 2008. I think McLaren will get more than, say, 40 points this season overall. But, yeah, I don't see them getting anywhere near Alpine. I think Alpine will probably end up with at least 100 points this season. And I don't think they'll be too far away, Alpine, either from whoever finishes in 4th place, whether it's Ferrari, Mercedes, or Aston Martin. Let's find a couple more comments and then we'll get on to the rest of the teams. Silverback says Alpine will beat Ferrari by end of season. Greg Martinez saying this is just embarrassing for Ferrari. Not sure what that's in relation to. Crystal Racing asking, do Red Bull really need any more upgrades? No, obviously not. If they could literally just not put any more new parts on the car and they would, still be dominating. But it's obviously solidify their dominance. And I think Red Bull, so far, because of how brilliant they've been, I think they probably know that it is possible they can win every race this season. So I think they will be trying their absolute most to do that. Because, of course, Mercedes, who just dominated Formula 1 for the last few years, despite all that dominance, were not able to, to get that record. Mercedes, closest they got was, I think, 2016, where Mercedes won every race except for two, which was this race in Spain and the Malaysian Grand Prix in Kuala Lumpur. So, yeah, that'd be a really great record for Red Bull to get, and obviously would put them ahead of everyone else in the history of Formula 1, because no team has ever won every single race in a season. Somber Mike says, well, that is the worst pick of straw I have ever seen. Let me try and find it. Oh, no. It's no, it's not that. Let me, yeah. There you go. Yeah, it is a bit... I know what you mean. It is a bit weird, but yeah. Let's hope it can actually deliver on track for Aston Martin. Anyway, let's now get on to the final few teams, and then, of course, we'll come to the poll results in chat. So let's go on to McLaren. I mean, the result in the end, 9th and 10th in Monaco, good result considering it was the best they could get, but I am really down on McLaren right now. Really down on McLaren. Because, I mean, after their Baku upgrade, I was hoping that they would be able to fight with Alpine for the rest of the season for 5th in the championship, which honestly would have been a good save from them from where they were at the start of the season. But yeah, in Monaco, Alpine showed their clear superiority. I mean, Alpine were not just quicker than McLaren, they were miles quicker than McLaren in Monaco. And, I mean, I know they're going to be bringing these big upgrades to their home race, basically a new car. But I just don't see how McLaren will ever this season be as good as Alpine. I just don't see it. I think there'll be races maybe where McLaren are quicker because Alpine, they're not the most reliable team all of the time. They have their issues in certain races. We saw that plenty of times last year, where Alpine didn't always get the best result they could have. But yeah, McLaren just fundamentally have a shit car. I think that's really the best way of putting it. The two drivers are doing absolutely fine. I think they're actually doing a very good job in that McLaren. And they're actually quite lucky, McLaren, they have two such good drivers. Because if they didn't, then they would be probably lower than 6th in the championship, possibly behind a Haas and Alfa Romeo. So yeah, McLaren, absolutely terrible in 2023. And for this weekend, I don't see how it's going to be any better, really, than what we saw in Monaco. I think the higher speed corners here in Barcelona will help bring them closer to Alpine, but again, if it's not, one issue with McLaren, it's another, because in Monaco, even though there were no real straights, and of course their straight line speed is by far the worst on the grid, and that's a big reason why at times they are so slow. In Monaco, obviously that problem was eliminated, but then they had the problem of, well, the top 5 teams fundamentally all had much better cars, and there was nothing McLaren could do to get anywhere near them. And even, not only were they slower than those top 5 teams, they were slower than AlphaTauri, because Yuki Tsunoda was comfortably ahead of both McLarens in the dry until Tsunoda's brakes gave up. So, Monaco, a place you would think would be one of their best races, wasn't really that good at all. So coming here to Barcelona, a track that, there'll be certain areas of the track where it'll help their car. Certain areas of the track will absolutely punish their car's poor performance. And especially in the first sector, I expect McLaren to be very slow because they still have a incredibly draggy car. And in the first sector, it is very high speed. I mean, you're only braking, lifting off, whatever you want to call it, really for turn 1. Because through turn 2, you're flat, and through turn 3, you are pretty much flat out, if not absolutely flat out. So, yeah, sector 1, they'll be too slow. Sector 2 will come back a bit more towards them, and so will sector 3. But in the end, they will end up with a result in qualifying and the race which is just not that good. It doesn't help, of course, that Lando Norris has never really been that great here at the Spanish Grand Prix. He's never had really that great results here for McLaren in the past few years. I think 2019 had a crash with Stroll. 2020, I think, finishing like 10th place. 2021, his great season, he actually finished behind Ricciardo in that race and was legitimately slower than Ricciardo that weekend. And then last year, I think he finished in 8th place, but I think he was quite ill. But yeah, it wasn't super quick, nor really were McLaren. So yeah, I think McLaren will have a pretty poor weekend, and I don't see them scoring a point from the Spanish Grand Prix. One thing I am looking at, though, quickly is to see how Oscar did in his last race here in Spain. Well, surprisingly, did not race Formula 2 in Barcelona in 2021. So let me just look to see what he did. So the last time he raced here in Barcelona was in 2020. And that was in Formula 3. Of course, he won the Formula 3 championship in 2020. And he did win the sprint race. So, yeah. I think you can expect Oscar to be about as competitive as he was in Spain. Pretty much on the pace of his teammate. Probably just behind, most likely. Looking at what he did in qualifying that weekend in Formula 3, he was actually 0.2 of a second slower than the pole position man that weekend. Logan Sargent in the Prema car, or Prima car, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, with Oscar, he'll be up there with Norris. He'll be, getting really the best out of what is a pretty shit car at the end of the day. And I think McLaren have a massive fight on their hands with teams like Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, Haas, maybe even Williams, who I expect will all be on pretty much similar pace throughout the entire Spanish Grand Prix weekend. Now we'll finish up with the final few teams. Alfa Romeo. Yeah, Valtteri Bottas, as I said earlier, has always been very quick here. Important to remember, of course, Alfa Romeo were very quick here last year, as Bottas, for quite a while, I think, was in a top 5 position in the race, and really was screwed out of a good result because his team did not get the strategy right. I think they left him out a bit too long. I think other teams did a 3-stop and he decided to do a 2-stop, or Alfa Romeo decided to do a 2-stop strategy. And the tyres were absolutely finished in the end, and was cost even more points than it should have been for the Finn. But I mean, in Monaco, Valtteri had, I think, a good performance. The Alfa Romeo car didn't seem that bad. And also, shout out for his brilliant overtake on Alex Albon at the hairpin. That was a really good move from Valtteri. But yeah, here in Spain, he's always been quick. Alfa Romeo have some new upgrades on the car that they brought from, or are bringing from Monaco. So I think Alfa Romeo will be right up there with teams like McLaren, AlphaTauri, and fighting to get themselves into the top 10 in qualifying. And Valtteri Bottas, I think, will just sneak into 10th place. But I don't think Alfa Romeo will have enough speed to hold on to a points finish in the race, and I expect Alpine to take up the final 2 points paying positions of 9th and 10th. And also, going back to Alpine, the reason I've got Gasly in my predicted qualifying outside the top 10 is because Gasly's never really been super quick at this track. He's never had like a proper great result in, say, qualifying. And he's not been, I would say, as impressively quick as Ocon has been here in the past. I think Ocon, he had a really good qualifying, I think, here. Not last year, the year before in 2021 for Alpine, where he was up in 5th or 6th on the grid. And there's a couple other years where Ocon's been quite quick for the car he was driving. So yeah, that's why I think Gasly will be knocked out in Q2, but then will still make it into the top 10 for the race. But yeah, watch out for Valtteri Bottas and Alfa Romeo. Another person to watch out for is Kevin Magnussen in the Haas F1 car, because Haas should be a lot quicker this weekend. I think this track suits their car much more than what we saw in Monaco. And Kevin is really quick around this circuit. 2018 here for Haas, he finished up in 6th. 2019, I think he finished in 7th, I think it was, for Haas. And last year even, he qualified up in, I think it was 7th or 8th place. I can't remember exactly where it was. But yeah, he has always been really quick at this circuit. And with the type of driver he is, and with those new final 2 corners being re-added, with the commitment he drives with, I think he is going to be one of the drivers definitely to watch out for in qualifying. And I think you can expect a much better performance from Haas F1 in in this weekend's race overall than what we saw in Monaco, where they were quite clearly the worst team in Monaco. And going back to the upgrades with Ferrari, of course, Haas F1 do still share parts and have similarities with the Ferrari car. We've seen that since the start of 2022 with these regulations. And yeah, with Haas, of course, with Ferrari's new upgrade, that's not going to be coming onto the Haas car immediately, but I would expect probably in about a month from now when we get to Silverstone for Haas to have essentially that new side pod that Ferrari have gone for. So that should help Haas's fight to finish 7th in the championship, a position that obviously they're going to be trying to absolutely get this season. It would be a great result for them, I think, after the troubles they've had in the last year or so. And yeah, we'll see, of course, if they can actually get it. AlphaTauri, the penultimate team we'll go on to, they are the dark horse this weekend. And the reason I say that is for a couple reasons. Last weekend in Monaco, their car, rather, saw the most upgrades from any team. They put on so many new parts onto this car. It was essentially a new car for the AlphaTauri team, and really it had to be, because the start of their season has not been that great. And of course, they don't want to be finishing last in the championship, or even second last once again like they did last year in the Constructors' Championship. So yeah, loads of new parts have been put on this AlphaTauri car, and Yuki Tsunoda, with those new parts, was very quick in qualifying in Monaco. Obviously qualified in 9th place and finished quite, a bit further down than 9th, of course. But again, if it was not for that brake issue, Tsunoda would have finished in P9. He was comfortably ahead of the 2 McLarens and wasn't really under threat from the 2 McLarens either. He was just holding his own, doing his own race, and was heading for a good 9th place finish until his brakes started to trouble him. So watch out for AlphaTauri, especially with a very confident Yuki Tsunoda at the wheel. I think if there's going to be a major surprise, I think Tsunoda and AlphaTauri will be that team. So watch out for them, because if their upgrades really do work here, they could be right up there, getting into Q3, say, with Tsunoda, and maybe getting better than, say, P10, and maybe even a 9th or even an 8th place finish if Tsunoda really delivers a brilliant weekend for the team. So watch out for them. I've got a good feeling about them. I think they're going to have a really good weekend. And, my prediction so far, of course, is that they won't finish in the points or get into the top 10 in qualifying, but I kind of want to see what their pace in practice is like, because I do have a good feeling about them. I think they'll be very close to the top 10 qualifying and the race. And finally for Williams, yeah, this weekend they'll be a more competitive than what we saw in Monaco. I mean, they weren't that bad in Monaco. Albon qualified in, 12th place or 13th place. Wasn't that far away from getting into the top 10 in Monaco. So watch out for Albon. Of course, always super quick on a qualifying day. And we do know that Williams, they've got the race pace as well to hang with teams like Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, and compete with them. The issue and the reason they're last in the championship at the minute is they get good qualifying positions, but then something just goes wrong in the race that means they can't deliver their max potential in the race itself. And that really is the issue with Williams at the minute. They've got a good car, a much better car than what we saw this time last year, but it's just them delivering on it in the race when it matters. That's what the problem is. So if Albon does get a good qualifying result where he qualifies in the top, say, 12, 13 on the grid, do not count out him for a points finish, because I think it's definitely a possibility for the Williams team, who should be really quick throughout the weekend. And like I just said with Logan Sargent, pole position here in Formula 3, and I think despite him having a massive train of cars behind him at one point, he had a good weekend in Monaco. Wasn't that far actually from making it into Q2 for the Williams team. And I expect him to have another decent weekend for the team as well. So yeah, keep your eye on Williams, but most likely they'll be one of the slowest teams here overall. But there won't really be a clear slowest team this weekend, I don't think, in Spain. But there you go, guys, and I'll move on with that creepy picture. I don't want to be looking at that anymore. That is my weekend preview for the 2023 Spanish Grand Prix. Before I go, though, let me enter the poll in the chat. And let's see who you guys think will win the Spanish Grand Prix. So, with 53 votes and 71% of the vote, you guys have voted for Max Verstappen as your man who will win the Spanish Grand Prix. Your second choice is Fernando Alonso. Third, then, is Perez with Leclerc, and fourth, Perez and Leclerc, though, both joint on 3%. So, yeah, I think the chances of Max Verstappen not winning the race this weekend is very, very, very low. It would take a monstrous driver performance and an amazing, surprising, out-of-nowhere team performance to stop Verstappen in the Red Bull. But, guys, thank you so much for coming along. The weekend preview, again, reminder of what my next two pieces of content are. Tomorrow night I'll be back live for the full qualifying preview at 8 PM UK time for the Spanish Grand Prix. And then on Saturday I will be doing a watch along for practice 3, the F2 sprint race, and qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix. That F2 sprint race, by the way, with the new track layout, and given that you don't have to pit in the sprint, that is going to be a very exciting race, so make sure to check that out as well, not just practice 3 and qualifying with me. Yeah, I'll be live on Saturday from 11:15 AM UK time all the way through until 4:30 PM, and then of course on Sunday I'll be live at 12 PM UK time, 2 hours before the race starts for the build up to the race, then the watch along for the race, and then a reaction to the events of this weekend's Grand Prix. So make sure to join me for all of that, guys. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to the channel for that content and smash the like button if you have not already. And if you want to keep up with the content on this channel, make sure to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. It is on Twitter. And if you want to join our growing community, link either down below in the chat or to the side on the chat rather, or in the description down below. For my Discord server, make sure to join that if you want to join our growing community here on this part of the internet. But guys, until my I've already done the weekend preview. Until my qualifying preview for this weekend's 2023 Spanish Grand Prix, race 7 of what is going to be, of course, a very long Formula 1 season. It has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.